of November 2020. My name is Ms. Rima Kiki, and I'm going to give you a lesson in grammar in grade 11, unit 3, in activity book, page 16. Let's begin together. The objectives of our lesson are: get new information about the conditional sentences, differentiate between the 3 kinds of conditional sentences, and lastly, do some exercises. I want you to know, first of all, that our lesson it is about grammar, about conditional sentences, and the 3 kinds of conditional sentences are having the same basic form. They are having the same basic form. So we have if clause, and then we have main clause. The only difference is that the time difference. It is about the tense in the main verbs. It is the difference, the only difference. But we have the same basic form. We have if clause and then main clause. Let's see these 3 examples. Notice with me the differences between the verbs. First of all, the first conditional, if I get sick, I will go to the doctor. The second one, if I got sick, I would go to the doctor. If I got sick, I would go to the doctor. 3, if I had been sick, I would have been to the doctor. If I had been sick, I would have gone to the doctor. So, as we have noticed, we have 2 clauses. The first one, it is if clause. If I got sick, we have subject, verb, and complement. And then the next one, also, it is a clause. It is result clause, the main clause. Also, we have subject, verb, and complement. So the only difference is the tense. Let's begin with the first conditional. As you have noticed, the tense is simple present or present simple with if. If plus present simple. And the second one, the main clause, it is with will plus verb in infinitive form. It is in infinitive form. For example, if it is hot tomorrow, I'll go for a swim at the beach. If it is hot tomorrow, I'll go for a swim at the beach. So what do I mean with this sentence? I mean it is real. It is real. It's going to happen with every one of us, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in the future. So it is possible to happen in the future. It's likely chance it will happen. It's going to happen. It's real. It's going to happen with every one of us in the future, in the near future, and in the near future, perhaps everyone, if it is sunny or if it's hot tomorrow, he will go and swim. The second one, the second conditional, let's notice the tense. If plus past simple. If plus past simple. And the main clause, would plus verb and infinitive. Would plus verb with infinitive. For example, if I had more money, I'd buy a boat. If I had more money, I'd buy a boat. So here we have a contraction of would, like add, he'd, you'd, they'd, or would. So we would, it is a contraction. So we have past simple. It is, this sentence, it is unreal. It is unreal. And it is an imaginary situation in the present time or in the future. I'm imagining that if I had money, I'd buy a boat. If I had money, I'd buy a car. So it is not an actual situation. Now in the present, it is not an actual situation. It is imaginary situation. I imagine that I have money. So if I had money, I'd buy a boat. But it is not real. It's unreal situation. Imaginary situation in the present. So let's notice the first conditional versus the second conditionals. The first one, if I miss the bus, I will take a taxi. So in the future, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, if I miss the bus, I will take a taxi. So it's likely to happen. It's likely to happen. It is possible to happen with every one of us in the future. If I missed the bus, I would take a taxi. So it's unlikely to happen. It is an imaginary situation. I imagine that if I missed the bus, I didn't catch the bus, I would take a taxi. Or perhaps I would take a bus. Or I would go with my car. Okay. Now, let's move to our lesson. It is about third conditional. Third conditional, let's notice the tense. If plus past perfect and the main clause, the result clause, it is would have plus past participle. Past participle. Let's read here the sentence. If we had looked at the weather report, we would have stayed home. We would have stayed home. We wouldn't get out of our house and rain watering our clothes. So the third conditional, it is regrets about the past. I wish I didn't do that. It is regrets about the past. It is a wish we could change something in the past, and I would tell someone off about something they did in the past. So I regret about that. I regret that I hadn't looked at the weather report. I hadn't looked at the weather report, and we wouldn't have stayed at home. We went out of our homes and then get stuck in rain. So it is regrets, it is a wish in the past, in the past. Again, if I had taken better care of myself, I wouldn't have got sick. If I had taken better care of myself, I wouldn't have got sick. So it is regret about the past. Regret about the past. That I hadn't taken better care of myself and now I am sick. So I wouldn't have got sick. So now I am sick because I hadn't taken better care of myself, my health. So we have imaginary situation in the past, and also the result is imaginary result in the past also. It is not real now, it is in the past, it's imagination. We use our imagination. If we have different outcomes or different reasons, we would have different outcomes. If I had taken better care of myself, I wouldn't have got sick. Okay. We have extra tips to understand more the conditionals. First of all, if is a conjunction. It connects between two clauses. It is a conjunction like and, but. The second notice, you can change the order of the clauses. The order of the clauses. For example, if it stopped raining, I would go for a walk. So here, I start with if conditional, if clause. Here we have a comma. But if we reverse it and start with the main clause, I would go for a walk, here notice that we don't have a comma. If it stopped raining, if clause is the second one, so we cancel comma between them. There is no difference, but only that we cancel the comma here. But the meaning is still the same. The third one, subject plus would. Subject plus would are contracted, usually contracted when spoken. So I don't say I would. It's better to say I'd. You'd, she'd, he'd, and they'd. It's better to say in contraction forms. The fourth one, it breaks grammar rules. It breaks some grammar rules because verb to be with I, it comes was. But here in conditional sentences, we don't use was, we use were. So wear with all the pronouns. I say I wear, he wear, and she wear, and it wear. Don't say was, it's correct, but it is not formal. So wear is more formal than was. So those were the 4 extra tips about conditional sentences. And now let's move to do our exercises on page 16 in grammar, in activity book. First of all, I want you to complete these sentences about the history of chocolate. Use the correct form of the verb in brackets. Perhaps you are going to use the second or the third conditional sentences. The second or the third. With the second conditional, I use with if, simple past, and with the main clause, would plus infinitive. And with the third conditional, I use past perfect, had plus past participle, and the next one, the main clause, I'm using would have plus past participle. Let's read them. If the Olmecs discovered cocoa beans 3,000 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to produce the modern chocolate bar. This is the first one. We wouldn't have been able to produce. Let's see the answers. So if the Olmecs, what shall I use here? It is third conditional. So I must put had not discovered cocoa beans 3,000 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to produce the modern chocolate bar. I use it in negative form because the second one, the main clause, is in the negative form. We wouldn't have been able to produce the modern chocolate bar. It is in the negative form, so I use also negative in the if clause. If the Olmecs hadn't discovered cocoa beans 3,000 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to produce the modern chocolate bar. The second one, in 1528, chocolate arrived in Spain. If it had arrived earlier, it would have spread to the rest of Europe faster. So here also we have would have spread, and the first one must be excellent, past perfect, had arrived. Arrived is regular form, regular verb. We add ed. See, some people today eat too much chocolate. If they eat less, they would be healthier. Here it is the second conditional because we have only would plus infinitive. So the verb is going to be in past simple. If they ate less, they would be healthier. D, the Aztecs used cocoa beans as money. If they hadn't used the beans in this way, their society would not have been as advanced as it was. So here also I have to put it in negative form because here the main clause is also negative. And we have wouldn't have been. So this structure, we use the third conditional, past perfect, hadn't used. The last sentence, if Belgian chocolaters didn't develop chocolate making techniques, Belgium wouldn't be so famous for its chocolates. So if Belgian chocolaters, the second one, it is in would plus infinitive. So the first one, it is in simple past. And to make it negative in simple past, we add didn't. Didn't, and the main verb is it is infinitive form. So it didn't develop chocolate making techniques. Belgium wouldn't be so famous for its chocolates. So this is exercise number 1. And now let's move to exercise number 2. This exercise is about tourism with the correct forms of the verbs in italics. Complete the sentences with the correct forms of the verbs in italics. It is in the second conditional. it is in second conditional. I want you to put it perhaps in first or second conditional only. First or second conditional only. Read it carefully. Try to answer them, to complete the sentences correctly, and then we will see the answers. Okay. Let's see the answers. Let's see the answers. If people want to visit the archaeological museum, they will have to buy a ticket before they enter. So the second clause is will plus infinitive. The first one, if, with the present simple. Excellent. If flights were cheaper, more people would take trips to other countries. So here we have would plus infinitive, and we are going to put if with where. Don't put was, where. And here noun is not singular, it is plural. So if flights were cheaper, more people would take trips to other countries. It is second conditional. C, the cost of tourism would be much lower if it were possible to find more affordable hotels. So also it is second conditional. We have would be, and here we have were. Not was, if it were. And where is the comma? We don't have comma because we begins with the main clause, the result clause, and then the if clause here. D, if space tourism became very popular, they would have to build space hotels. Imagine that we have space hotels on Mars. It's going to be fantastic. So if space tourism became very popular, became, it is simple past, became, and here we have would have to. Would plus infinitive. The last one, if you look at the sky from an aeroplane, if you look at the sky from an aeroplane, this one is first conditional. It is in simple present. The next one, you can see the tops of the clouds. You can see the tops of the clouds. Let's listen to these sentences together.
To complete these sentences about tourism with the correct form of the verbs.
A. If people want to visit the archaeological museum, they will have to buy a ticket before they enter. B. If flights were cheaper, more people would take trips to other countries. C. The cost of tourism would be much lower if it were possible to find more affordable hotels. D. If space tourism became very popular, they would have to build space hotels. E. If you look at the sky from an airplane, you can see the tops of the clouds.
Excellent. And
To
now,
complete these sentences.
let's move to exercise number 3. Answer these questions about someone who was thinking of opening a cafe, using the words in italics in your answer. The first one is done for you. If he opened a cafe, what would he say? So between brackets, we have coffee and tea. I would say, if he opened a cafe, he'd sell coffee and tea. So it is in second conditional. If he opened a cafe, he'd sell coffee and tea. Let's continue B. If he wanted to sell cakes too, where would he make them? In between brackets, we have kitchen. So if he wanted to sell cakes too, he would make them in the kitchen. Also, it is second conditional. So it is an imaginary situation in the present time. C, if he wanted to become a cafe owner, what would he need to do first? Between brackets, we have training course. So if he wanted to become a cafe owner, he would need to do a training course first. D, if he owned a cafe, what would he do at the end of each day? If he owned a cafe, what would he do at the end of each day? Between brackets, we have count the day's money. So if he owned a cafe, he would count the day's money at the end of each day. He'd count the day's money at the end of each day. Let's make them a conversation and let's hear this sound or this recording.
Answer these questions about someone who was thinking of opening a cafe.
If he opened a cafe, what would he sell?
If he opened a cafe, he'd sell coffee and tea. If he wanted to sell cakes too, where would he make them?
If he wanted to sell cakes too, he would make them in the kitchen.
If he wanted to become a cafe owner, what would he need to do first?
If he wanted to become a cafe owner, he would need to do a training course first.
If he owned a cafe, what would he do at the end of each day?
If he owned a cafe, he would count the day's money at the end of each day.
Yes. And now let's move to the last question for today. It is question number 4. Now imagine that the person in exercise 3 didn't open a cafe. Imagine that the person in exercise 3 didn't open a cafe. Rewrite your answers to sentences changing the verb's tense. So it will become in third conditional because it is an imaginary situation. The first one, if he'd opened a cafe, he'd have sold coffee and tea. If he'd opened, it is past perfect. A cafe, he'd have sold coffee and tea. The second one, if he'd wanted to sell cakes too, he'd have made them in the kitchen. So the first one, if clause is past perfect, he'd wanted, and the second one, he'd have made. The third sentence, if he'd wanted to become a cafe owner, he'd have needed to do a training course first. So the first one, if condition, is in past perfect. If he'd wanted, past perfect, had plus verb 3, and this one, he'd have needed, would have plus verb 3 or past participle again to do a training course. The last one, if he'd owned a cafe, he'd have counted the day's money at the end of each day. So this question is in third conditional to imagine a different situation in the past. This is the end of our lesson. I want to thank you for watching and see you again. Goodbye.